So everyone knows Genghis Khan was great.
Can I just stop you right there? We don't all know that Genghis Khan was great. Didn't he kill loads of people, including loads of women?
Sorry. You're really going to pull that card on me, are you? Sure, Genghis Khan killed some people, but the numbers are exaggerated. But anyway, I thought we were here to discuss if he was a feminist or not.
Fine, but don't you also say his name really weird? Genghis? I've never heard anyone say it like that before.
But I'm saying it right. Most people have it completely wrong. Except really it should be Chinggis, but it's a bit pretentious so I don't say it.
Point taken.
Thank you.
But you're the one who thinks he's a feminist. What evidence have you got?
I mean, all we have to do is look at how he treated the women in his life. He adored his mum, Oilan, and she had a lot of political power. And he chose to stick by his wife at her lowest moment. It says a lot about him.
Can I just say, being nice to your mom and wife is kind of what you would call the bare minimum. Not exactly enough to call yourself a feminist.
But will you let me finish? Please.
Sorry.
Sure, he married his daughters off to powerful men, but they were the ones that really had the power in the relationship. The men would have to join Genghis's army and go off and fight and risk their lives, while the women controlled the land and the economy. They had a pretty good deal, but if the women did want to fight, they could, and did, including some of his daughters. He was just like a modern CEO trying to empower the women around him.
Are you joking? If you're comparing him to modern CEOs, then he's not much of a feminist at all. Most CEOs don't seem to care about the women around them. It's kind of a stupid statement.
Okay, it was a poor choice of words. But you get my point, right?
Even if we ignore the CEO comment, which we shouldn't, is any of that really enough to call someone a feminist? I mean, do you even know what feminist means? I've got this book you can lend if you want.
It just means women can do what they want, right? I mean, sorry, I only really read history books.
To be fair, that's not far off a decent working definition. There's no one size fits all. There's all kinds of definitions that different people have come up with at different times. The history of feminism is pretty complicated. You should read a book on it sometime. For the purpose of this discussion, let's say it means the political, social, and economic equality of the sexes.
I get it.
In the West, we're way more concerned with things like reproductive rights, whereas in other parts of the world...
I get it. Stop mansplaining, please.
Sorry. Point taken.
So what do you need to know about him to make a decision then?
You've already said that the women around him had some political power. What about the everyday women around him?
We actually don't know a lot about them, but some European travellers like William of Rubruck did visit the Mongolian steppe not long after Genghis died, and he wrote notes on how they lived. And in most cases, they had much better lives and a lot more freedom than women had back in Europe, especially once Genghis took control.
That's great, but there's an elephant in the room.
Is there?
Let me finish. What about all the, rape?
Oh, that. It's a bit of a grey area. I mean, it probably did happen in his army, but a lot less than in other armies, and, like loads of people did it before and since, so can you really blame them?
I definitely want to argue that.
Go for it.
Is what someone does or allows to happen okay if someone did it before them? I'll give you a hint. No.
Fair. Other armies doing it before him is not really much of a defence, I get that.
Did he personally order it to happen?
We really don't know. We have records of his sons doing it after he was dead, so why would we have records of them but not him?
And did he do it himself?
Probably not. But as I said, we don't know tons about it. He did have a lot of enemies and people did write very bad things about him, so it's not out of the question. But there's no real solid evidence.
Okay, but let's not gloss over this. Even if he didn't do it himself, he still didn't stop a system where it could happen. And we shouldn't just let that slide.
Yeah, I get your point. Like, it's not really enough to say, well, everyone else was doing it. I just had a thought. Maybe one of your feminist books has something on this? Can someone from like the 1200s, like 800 years ago, really be a feminist? I'm curious.
Some feminists would say no, it's not possible because they had nothing to compare themselves to. How could they meet a definition of something that they didn't know of? But that's a bit too simplistic. It's perfectly possible that people in the past did have feminist traits.
Nice.
Back to the whole rape thing. I remember hearing somewhere that something like 10% of the world's population is related to Genghis Khan, has his DNA. I think particularly in Asia, maybe. What's that about?
Now we're talking. TLDR, it's kind of true, kind of false. It's a great story.
Go on.
Basically, we don't know where his body was buried. There's a bit of a bad story there, but we'll skip over it for now.
Maybe we should talk about that story.
Honestly, I'd love to, but they're saying we're taking too long.
We better do what they want then.
So, because we don't know where his body was buried, we can't test his DNA against loads of people alive today. But in all honesty, it probably is his, because the timing of the root genes is pretty much around the time he was alive. So, yeah, probably true.
Aha. So he forced himself on loads of women then?
Not really. All this really shows is the effect of having a really powerful family. Everyone wanted to marry his sons and daughters, just to say that they were related to the great Genghis Khan. And over 800 years, his genes have spread way better than most people's. That doesn't need him to have loads of children. He had like 11 officially. And as recently as 100 years ago, people related to him were still in power in Central Asia. It just shows the staying power of his name.
That's actually a really good explanation. I'm impressed.
Cheers.
But I'm not convinced yet.
Oh, can I just say one more thing about his daughters? Actually, two of them. It's quite interesting actually. One of them, Alakai Bek, was sent to rule over the Ongud tribe. She faced rebellions and assassination attempts, but she managed to protect her stepchildren and bring stability. Ultimately, she was responsible for helping protect the empire. The other case is a bit more like father, like daughter. At the height of his power, Genghis was sieging the city of Nishapur in Central Asia, when his daughter Tumilan's husband was killed by one of the defenders. When all was said and done, and Genghis had won, all that rhymed. Tumilan decided to have everyone in the city murdered as revenge. And Genghis did it. Some say like over 1 million were killed. I mean, it's probably an exaggeration, but still, probably hundreds of thousands of people died.
Yikes.
I know, right? Bit of a bummer.
But in all honesty, it's kind of impressive that they had the autonomy to be able to make that decision, even if they chose to do something truly horrible with it.
Oh, I just remembered actually, he actually said a really important thing about the relationship between men and women. If a 2-shaft cart breaks the second shaft, the ox cannot pull it.
Okay, I think I get it.
And if a 2-wheel cart breaks the second wheel, then it cannot move. This was the kind of metaphor to describe the relationship between men and women, that both were equally important to upholding everything about themselves. And carts were like super important to Mongols, and women had complete control over them. Bit of a smoking gun if you ask me.
Not quite.
What now?
What I really want to know is the long-term effects he had on the women around him.
I told you how society was organised.
True, but what I want to know is what kind of structures he put in place.
This is complicated. So I think we've already established that he was great for the women of his time, right? I saw that.
What? My eye twitched. Sorry about that.
Whatever.
Again, I'm sorry.
But anyway, as I was saying, he was great for the women around him, but his sons ruined everything. Once Genghis was dead, they undermined his wife and their mother Borta, and they stripped as much power as they could from their sisters. And all round they were just a bit incompetent.
So they were fail sons then?
Yeah, basically. But how much can you really blame him for that? He tried to leave a good system and balance behind. He tried to make sure the empire would continue, which it did, to be fair. But he didn't mean for the women to suffer as a result.
Yeah, I guess that is a kind of complicated situation. Not really his fault. Do you have any final points that you want to get across?
Let me see, I've got this book. Oh, sorry. I was just reading about this time that someone insulted Genghis.
I would imagine that did not go well for them.
You're not wrong. What do you say? Can we wrap this up? I'm starving, mate.
Sure, let's decide. On 1. 3, 2, 1.
He was kind of a feminist.
Not quite.
I'm kind of surprised. What held you back in the end?
I mean, he sounds a lot more balanced than I expected him to be. And he definitely doesn't seem to have been a misogynist. But it's kind of hard to look past the worst things he did, especially by not fully getting rid of rape as punishment.
To be honest, now I understand feminism better. I don't think he was as much as I thought he was, but he was still way better than most men. But what we think is irrelevant. Let me know in the comments what you think.
Let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you agree with me.
Right, fancy some fish and chips?